Today, we're diving into something that a lot of us feel, but maybe can't quite name. It's that brain fog, that mental sludge. But what if I told you there's a name for it? Brain trash, and a really powerful, maybe a little weird, way to clear it all out. And yeah, it all starts with a simple can of sardines.
So, let me just ask you this. Do you ever have those days where you feel like you're just wading through mud? You can't focus, you've got zero motivation, and your brain just feels slow? It's a super common feeling, right?
Well, according to Dr. Annette Bosworth, who specializes in these kinds of chronic issues, there's a perfect name for that feeling. She calls it brain trash. And it's not just you having a bad day, it's actually a sign that something deeper is going on inside your body.
So what exactly is brain trash? It's not just a catchy phrase. We're talking about real metabolic waste and cellular gunk that can actually build up in our system, and it directly messes with our brain's performance.
And the symptoms of this buildup, they're probably going to sound pretty familiar to a lot of you. That constant brain fog, that feeling of having no drive, struggling with your memory, or just not feeling as sharp as you know you can be. Dr. Bosworth argues this is not a normal part of getting older, it's a huge red flag for cognitive decline.
Okay, so what's the culprit here? What's causing all this trash to pile up in the first place? Dr. Bosworth points a finger at one key player, a hormone that, when it gets out of whack, basically becomes the villain of our whole metabolic story. And that villain is insulin.
Dr. Bos has this really simple, kind of brilliant way of putting it. She says, insulin insulates. It makes you fluffy. Its main job is to store energy. But when you have too much insulin floating around all the time, it gets too good at its job, and it starts storing all that extra energy as fat. And trust me, the damage goes way beyond just gaining weight. When insulin is chronically high, it's tied to high blood pressure, inflammation, and it directly fuels that brain fog we've been talking about. It's even linked to serious neurodegenerative diseases, basically acting like a silent gas pedal for the aging process.
And this brings us to a really important point. A totally different way of thinking about health. The old way, what you could call medicine 2.0, pretty much just throws pills at the symptoms of high insulin. But the metabolic approach, that's all about fixing the root cause. The goal isn't just to manage the problem, it's to actually reverse the damage by getting your insulin back under control.
So if insulin is the villain, you're probably wondering, who's the hero? Well, the best part is your own body has a built-in cleanup crew just waiting for the signal to get to work. And the two key players are called ketosis and autophagy.
First up, ketosis. All this means is your body literally flips a switch on its fuel source. See, instead of running on the constant drip of carbs and sugar that most of us eat, it starts burning fat for energy. And not only is this great for weight loss, but it produces these amazing little molecules called ketones, which are like a super premium fuel for your brain.
Exactly. Getting into ketosis is pretty much like hitting the big on switch for your body's internal trash removal service. It's the signal that it's officially time to clean house. And that amazing service is called autophagy. Seriously, think of it like a deep spring cleaning for your cells. Your body goes around, finds all the old, damaged, junky cells, the brain trash, and recycles them for parts. This clears out all the junk and makes way for new, healthy cells to grow. This is the process that brings back that mental clarity.
Okay, so how do we kick this whole process into high gear, quickly and effectively? Well, Dr. Bosworth has a simple but really powerful tool designed to force that metabolic reset. It's called the 3-Day Sardine Challenge. And the rules, they honestly could not be any simpler. For 3 straight days, you eat nothing but canned sardines. That's it. You can have up to 3 cans a day. The only other thing you have to do is make sure you're drinking plenty of water and keeping your electrolytes up. Look, it's intense for sure, but it's designed to be a short, sharp shock to your system.
But why sardines? Of all the things, right? Well, there are some very specific and pretty incredible reasons. They have 0 carbs, which means they don't spike your insulin at all. They are loaded with omega-3s that fight inflammation. And that combination of high protein and high fat, it crushes your hunger, which makes getting through the 3 days a whole lot easier.
Now, obviously, the Sardine Challenge is just a reset. It's not something you're going to do forever. So how do you keep these amazing benefits going for the long haul? Dr. Bosworth says it all comes down to one single, incredibly important rule for your metabolic health.
And here it is. This quote from Dr. Bosworth is a total game changer. It completely shifts the focus from what you're eating to when you're eating.
See, when you eat late at night, your insulin stays high while you sleep, and that stops your body from doing all its critical repair work and fat burning overnight.
So the practical takeaway here is just to create a daily finish line for your food. Just stop eating by 6 p.m. That's it. By doing that, you give your body this long, amazing window of time to let insulin fall, burn fat, and turn on that all-important cleanup crew.
All right, let's just do a quick recap of the core ideas we've covered. We have insulin, that storage hormone that becomes a problem when there's too much of it. We have ketosis, that fat-burning state that cleans your body and fuels your brain. We defined brain trash as the metabolic junk that causes brain fog. And then we talked about two powerful tools, the Sardine challenge for a rapid reset and that crucial timing rule, just stop eating after 6 p.m.
You know, when you start putting all of these pieces together, you realize this is about so much more than just a 3-day challenge or getting rid of some brain fog. This is about a much, much bigger prize. It's about reclaiming your vitality for the long run and achieving what you could call metabolic freedom.
And this is the ultimate payoff. This is what a healthier future actually looks like. We're talking about stable energy and mood every single day. We're talking about sharp mental focus and literally reversing the markers of disease. It's about making sure your health span, the number of years you're actually healthy and active, matches your lifespan.
You know, Dr. Bosworth frames this in such a perfectly human way. At the end of the day, this isn't about numbers on a chart. It's about having the physical and mental energy to show up for the people you love. It's about being able to live the life you actually want to live for as long as you possibly can.
So we'll just leave you with this one last thought. It's a pretty wild idea, but it's based on some really solid metabolic science. What if the key to a sharper brain and a longer, healthier life isn't in some complicated prescription, but it's sitting right there on a grocery store shelf?
Okay, let's get into this. You probably felt it, right? That slow creep of cognitive slowdown. It's not just, a bad night's sleep. It's that feeling of trying to think through cement, that notorious brain fog.
Yeah.
And for way too long, we've kind of just accepted this mental molasses as, an inevitable side effect of modern life. But our sources today, they suggested it's anything but inevitable.
Precisely. We are really moving past this idea that mental and physical fatigue is just a matter of stress or, getting older.
Right.
Dr. Bosworth's work, which is the core of our deep dive today, argues that this experience of constant information overload, the one that leads to cognitive failure, it's actually a systemic physical failure. It's rooted deep in our cellular energy system.
A physical failure.
Yes, a literal accumulation of, for lack of a better term, metabolic debris.
And here is the truly provocative angle. We have this startling suggestion that the key to reversing this cognitive decline, and maybe even reversing the whole trajectory of chronic disease, might lie in a single, intense, very short-term nutritional experiment.
I know where you're going with this.
When I first saw the title of the protocol, the Sardine Challenge, I honestly thought it was a joke. It sounds more like a college dorm dare than a serious medical intervention.
The name is certainly memorable, I'll give it that. And, perhaps that's intentional to grab attention in what is a very crowded field of wellness advice.
It definitely does that.
But our mission today is to look past that dramatic name and really seriously unpack Dr. Bosworth's whole philosophy of metabolic correction. We're going to use the detailed source materials you provided, and her approach, it really argues for an intensive, fast-track method for achieving deep nutritional ketosis.
And the central premise here, it feels like an absolute paradigm shift. It's moving us away from what Hsu critiques as medicine 2.0, the symptom management model, and redirecting our focus toward the root cause.
Root metabolic correction.
Exactly. And it's radical because it claims that nearly all chronic illness, whether we're talking about high blood pressure, arthritis, or just that hazy thinking, it all traces back to one single correctable issue.
One root issue. And that issue, which is identified consistently across all our clinical work and really emphasized throughout the sources, is chronically elevated insulin levels.
Hyperinsulinemia.
Hyperinsulinemia, yes. And if we connect that concept to the bigger picture of health, we start to realize we're not just looking at diseases of weight, like obesity or type 2 diabetes.
That's much bigger than that.
So much bigger. We are looking at a fundamental systemic metabolic dysfunction that impairs everything. Your vascular system, your kidney function, your joint integrity, and crucially for this conversation, your brain chemistry and your neurotransmitter regulation.
This is where the claims get genuinely compelling. I mean, we aren't just discussing losing a few pounds.
Not at all.
The source materials preview these staggering outcomes from her patients who adopt this framework. Not just rapid fat loss, but profound, sustained mental clarity, a dramatic reduction of brain fog, and this is the one that really got me, evidence of deep cellular repair, including, surprisingly, the potential reversal of gray hair.
It's a big claim.
It posits a level of metabolic self-repair that just challenges so much of the conventional wisdom we have about aging.
It does. And that level of claimed repair, it requires a really deep investigation into the underlying science, which is exactly what we're going to do across this deep dive.
Okay, so to begin, we have to ground this in Dr. Bosworth's clinical perspective. The source identifies her as an internist. Before we dive into the science of it all, why is that specific medical specialization so important when we're talking about chronic illness?
That is a crucial starting point.
Yeah.
An internist isn't a general practitioner who's, dealing with a sinus infection or minor issues.
Right, they're not writing prescriptions for antibiotics all day.
No. Internists are the specialists who manage the really complex, long-term chronic illnesses. They're dealing with that interconnected web of conditions that, frankly, define modern decline. We're talking complicated type 2 diabetes, resistant hypertension, autoimmune disorders, and those early signs of neurological trouble.
So they are inherently focused on the patient as a whole, interconnected system, rather than just, one isolated set of symptoms.
Exactly. They look at the patient breaking down slowly, often over decades. And her decades of experience managing this complex breakdown, it led her to this what she calls an inescapable conclusion.
Which is?
That the vast majority of these chronic conditions, and the sources are exhaustive here, they list high blood pressure, inflammation, persistent fatigue, and cognitive decline, are fundamentally driven by the same single underlying mechanism.
Which is the hyperinsulinemia we mentioned.
The hyperinsulinemia. The human body, constantly bathed in high levels of insulin because of the modern high-carbohydrate, constant grazing diet, is just locked perpetually in a state of chronic fat storage and inflammation.
Okay, so this high insulin conclusion is really the foundation. It's the rock on which she builds her critique of traditional medical practice, what she labels medicine 2.0.
And that critique is, it's pointed. Maybe necessarily provocative, but it's pointed. Medicine 2.0, as she describes it, is the established model we're all familiar with.
Right, you go to the doctor with a problem, you get a pill for that problem.
It's an algorithmic approach focused completely on symptomatic management. If your blood pressure spikes, you receive a prescription for an antihypertensive drug. If your lipids are poor, you get a statin. If you report depression or anxiety, related to all this chronic stress, you receive a corresponding psychiatric medication.
So it's treating the symptom like it's the disease itself. It really is like putting duct tape over the dashboard warning lights while the engine just continues to burn oil.
That analogy, it perfectly captures the systemic failing she identifies. And look, while this model is absolutely life-saving in acute situations,
Of course.
and it certainly extends lifespan, the sources argue that it often traps the patient in this endless worsening cycle.
You're being managed, but you're not getting healthier.
Precisely. The patient is managed, yes, but they aren't necessarily getting healthier. They're just compiling a growing inventory of medications required to counteract the symptoms, all of which are being driven by the one unaddressed root cause.
The underlying metabolic dysfunction.
Caused by that chronically elevated insulin.
So if insulin is the key player here, we need to understand its function beyond, the basics. Most people, myself included, associate it primarily with regulating blood sugar. But she uses that powerful, almost visceral metaphor.
She emphasizes the storage function above all else, and that's key to understanding its role in disease pathology. The metaphor is so memorable, insulin insulates, it makes you fluffy. Simple, clear, and it really drives home the hormonal mechanism. Let's dig into that mechanism a bit more. Insulin's job is critical. It gets glucose from the bloodstream into our cells for energy. But what happens in the modern world where we're just constantly consuming simple carbs and spiking our glucose levels all day long?
Well, the system just becomes overwhelmed. It gets saturated. The body is, at its core, an efficiency machine. It's designed to store energy for times of scarcity.
Never come anymore.
Which never come. And insulin is the body's primary storage signal. It's the storage hormone. So when the cells are full, and you continue to supply excess glucose, that excess has to be stored. Insulin forces this extra glucose to be packaged and stored not just as quick access glycogen in your muscles and liver, but primarily as chronic long-term fat. And we need to be clear, this isn't just cosmetic fat that you can see.
No, absolutely not. This is the inflammatory, metabolically active fat. We're talking specifically about visceral fat, the deep adipose tissue that wraps around your abdominal organs.
The dangerous fat.
The most dangerous kind. This type of fat isn't just sitting there, it's constantly secreting inflammatory cytokines, which are these little proteins that fuel systemic inflammation throughout the entire body.
So the damage begins to cascade far beyond the scales, and it accelerates the entire aging process.
Yeah.
I want to spend some time detailing that cascade
Yeah.
because it's critical to understanding just how big this problem is. What are the comprehensive harms that are driven by sustained hyperinsulinemia?
Okay, so the sources detail four major systems that really collapse under this metabolic pressure. First is the cardiovascular system.
Okay.
High insulin directly drives hypertension or high blood pressure. And this isn't just, a simple plumbing issue.
It's more complex than that.
Much more. High insulin causes the kidneys to aggressively retain sodium and water, which increases your overall blood volume. At the same time, it also causes the smooth muscles that surround your blood vessels to constrict, which narrows the pipes.
So more volume, smaller pipes.
You get high pressure, it's inevitable.
And that immediately links diet to high blood pressure in a way that goes so far beyond just salt intake. It's the insulin signaling to the kidneys that's the primary problem.
Absolutely. The salt is a passenger, not the driver. The second major area of harm is systemic inflammation and aging. Chronic high insulin is profoundly pro-inflammatory. It accelerates cellular wear and tear and disrupts hormonal balance across the board.
Leading to what kinds of issues?
Well, this is where you see things like PCOS in women, you see gout, and it generally fuels all the itis diseases, arthritis, neuritis, you name it. If it ends in itis, inflammation is at its core.
The third system is perhaps the most concerning, and that's the neurological impact. You're saying high insulin is a primary suspect in neurological distress. So brain fog, mood instability, depression, anxiety, and even the beginnings of neurodegenerative diseases.
This is where we really have to pause and elaborate, because the connection here is often so surprising to people. High insulin leads to insulin resistance, not just in your muscle or your liver cells, but also in the neurons of the brain. The brain is incredibly metabolically greedy. It consumes a huge amount of energy.
Right.
If the neurons become insulin resistant, they struggle to take in the glucose they need for fuel. They are essentially starving in an environment that is full of fuel.
So wait, even if there's plenty of sugar floating around in the blood, the brain cells are signaling a famine.
Precisely. This state has been metaphorically labeled type 3 diabetes by some researchers. It's a slow, insidious starvation of the brain leading to dysfunction.
And when the brain is starved.
When the brain is starved, it results in the classic symptoms of brain fog, lethargy, difficulty with complex tasks. This impairment also drastically reduces the brain's ability to clear out metabolic waste, which leads us directly to that brain trash concept we'll get to later.
Wow.
And the sources link this chronic fuel mismanagement directly to the pathology seen in the development of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
That establishes such a clear physiological link between diet, insulin, inflammation, and profound cognitive decline. We often separate these things into different boxes, but Dr. Bosworth insists they are all one single continuum of metabolic health.
They are completely inseparable, and this leads us to the hidden trap that complicates all of this. The timing of when we eat.
Okay.
Many people believe they're fasting effectively just by, not eating for 12 hours. But if that 12-hour fast is preceded by a large carbohydrate-laden snack at 10 p.m., they completely miss the window for metabolic rest.
Why does eating late in the day maintain high insulin levels and disrupt that rest, even when your body is physically inactive during sleep?
Because the body requires several hours to fully process a meal, especially one that contains carbohydrates or a substantial amount of protein. When you eat late, your pancreas is forced to secrete a large amount of insulin, which then remains active in your bloodstream for a significant amount of time.
And that sustained pulse of insulin.
It acts as a powerful brake on the body's natural nighttime processes.
Which processes are we talking about here?
Well, firstly, fat burning. High insulin actively suppresses the release of stored fat for fuel. You cannot burn fat when insulin is high, period.
Okay, that's a big one.
And secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, it suppresses the critical nighttime repair and maintenance cycles, specifically autophagy, which we will detail shortly.
So if insulin is high.
If insulin is high, the body receives a strong store and grow signal, which prevents it from switching to the necessary repair and clean signal that should be happening during deep sleep.
This means all the advice about total calories or even your macronutrient balance.
Yeah.
Well, it's fundamentally flawed if it ignores the chronobiology of our metabolism.
It's functionally incomplete at best. Dr. Bosworth's work stresses that optimizing timing is a non-negotiable foundational step to restoring insulin sensitivity. It doesn't matter if you do the Sardine challenge or not, this is step one.
And this is captured in that really stark, kind of polarizing quote that serves as a metabolic commandment.
It is. It's designed to stick with you.
Let's have it again because it challenges everything we think we know about dieting.
1 bite of food after 6 p.m. is worth 10 bites before noon.
That statement is absolutely designed to provoke, but what is the physiological reality behind that hyperbole? Why is that evening bite so metabolically expensive?
The sources explain this through the concept of metabolic flexibility, or rather the lack of it, and the diminishing capacity of your liver and your pancreas as your circadian rhythm progresses towards sleep.
Okay, break that down.
In the morning, you are metabolically primed to use fuel efficiently. Your muscles and liver are receptive to insulin, they're ready to take up glucose. In the evening, however, the body is slowing down. It's preparing for rest. So calorie intake at 9 p.m. meets a less flexible, more resistant metabolic system.
So those late-night calories have a much, much higher probability of being immediately shuttled into chronic fat storage and disrupting that all-important overnight repair.
Precisely. By shifting the bulk of your calorie consumption earlier in the day, you ensure that your insulin levels have ample time to fall back to their baseline before you even lie down.
And that results in what?
2 massive benefits. Dramatically improved insulin sensitivity the very next day, and the unimpeded initiation of your nocturnal fat burning and repair mechanisms, which leads directly to higher quality, more restorative sleep.
So if the problem is rooted in this chronic insulin elevation, the constant storage signal, then the solution has to be to force the body out of that storage mode and into a radical fat-burning repair state.
Exactly.
And the materials define this solution as metabolic correction achieved through ketone production.
And the goal isn't just temporary weight loss. It's achieving metabolic flexibility.
What do you mean by that exactly?
It means training the body through intentional dietary shifts to efficiently and seamlessly switch to burning fat for fuel when carbohydrate-derived glucose isn't available. This deep metabolic state is what we call nutritional ketosis.
Okay, so for our listeners who may have heard the term ketosis thrown around, let's really solidify the definition in this context. It's the state where the body, starved of its preferred fuel, which is glucose.
It begins breaking down fat reserves, both the fat you eat and the fat stored on your body, into these little energy molecules called ketones.
And what's fascinating is the quality of this fuel. Ketones, especially one called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB.
They're not just an alternative fuel. In many ways, they're a superior clean-burning fuel source, especially for the brain.
Right.
Dr. Bosworth's clinical observations report just dramatic improvements in neurological function in her patients who maintain nutritional ketosis. We're talking about a sustained uplift in cognitive performance, focus, and energy that is, for many, life-changing.
And the sources suggest that ketones can kind of bypass many of the issues that are caused by that insulin resistance in the brain we were just talking about. So it's essentially providing the starving neurons with the energy they couldn't get from glucose. It sounds like switching from, I don't know, dirty diesel fuel to high-octane rocket fuel.
It's a very clean energy substrate. It requires less oxygen for conversion than glucose does, which provides a significant metabolic advantage. And the reported clinical results, they really reinforce this profound difference.
What are they seeing?
Well, beyond the expected fat loss and mental clarity, the sources repeatedly mention enhanced concentration, the elimination of brain fog, improved emotional stability. And then, the most surprising claim of all,
The gray hair thing?
the potential reversal of gray hair.
That is a huge claim. I mean, it requires a lot of scrutiny. How does a metabolic shift like ketosis potentially reverse something we assume is purely genetic or age-related, like your hair turning gray?
It's a fair question, and it suggests that the metabolic shift is initiating a much deeper cellular repair, something that goes way beyond just superficial improvements. The sources link it to 2 general principles. First, a massive reduction in inflammation. Graying is often accelerated by chronic systemic inflammation. By radically suppressing insulin and inflammation with ketosis, the underlying environment that stresses the pigment-producing cells in your hair follicles, the melanocytes, is cooled way down.
Okay, that makes sense. Less stress on the cells. And the second principle?
Autophagy and mitochondrial repair. The health of your hair, your skin, your nails, it's a direct reflection of the health of your cellular infrastructure.
Your internal machinery.
Exactly. And ketosis, by activating autophagy, cleans out old, damaged cellular components, including dysfunctional mitochondria, even in the hair follicles. So when the cellular repair machinery is optimized, some patients may see a restoration of the processes that govern pigment production.
Resulting in the return of natural color.
It's anecdotal for sure, but it serves as a powerful indicator of deep systemic health restoration.
This emphasis on deep cellular cleanup brings us to that central neurological metaphor she uses, which is the idea of brain trash.
It is a brilliant simplification of a very complex neurobiological process. Brain trash refers to the accumulation of all that metabolic waste, misfolded proteins, cellular debris, inflammatory byproducts, all the accumulated junk generated from a lifetime of high insulin, poor diet, chronic stress, and inflammatory load.
And for you listening, this trash isn't some abstract concept. It manifests as tangible symptoms that you feel every single day.
Exactly. The symptoms she tracks are that pervasive brain fog, unexplained exhaustion, chronic low motivation, the feeling of emotional flatness or cycles of anxiety and depression,
Memory lapses.
persistent memory lapses, and just that sense of general cognitive dullness. This is your central nervous system struggling to function efficiently because it's clogged with sludge.
So if that's a trash, how exactly does ketosis activate the cleanup crew? We really need to understand the mechanism of action here.
The primary mechanism is autophagy. As we mentioned, ketosis is a powerful activator of this process. The word itself, it means self-eating, but in practice, it's the body's highly sophisticated internal quality control and recycling program.
Let's detail this process because it's absolutely essential to the long-term benefit of this entire protocol. What does autophagy actually do at the cellular level?
Okay, so think of it as a specialized cellular digestion. The cell identifies its damaged components, mitochondria, that are no longer generating energy efficiently, misfolded proteins like the amyloid plaques implicated in neurodegeneration, or just worn-out organelles.
The junk.
All the junk. It then packages this debris into these little vesicles, transports it to a part of the cell called the lysosome, and breaks it down. The useful molecular building blocks get recycled, and the truly useless waste gets excreted.
So when we link ketosis to autophagy, we are directly linking our metabolic health to neuroprotection and long-term cognitive function.
It's the body's ancient programmed mechanism for resilience and maintenance. But, and this is critical, these two states, insulin, which is the storage and growth signal, and autophagy, the repair and cleanup signal, they are metabolically antagonistic.
They can't happen at the same time.
They cannot. When insulin is high, the body thinks there's an abundance of energy, and therefore its signals stop cleaning. Autophagy is profoundly suppressed. So by utilizing ketosis and the resulting low insulin state, we lift that suppression, allowing the repair signals to dominate and actively clear out that accumulated brain trash.
This physiological reality makes the case for early intervention incredibly urgent. If this decline is so gradual and so silent, as she suggests, we might not recognize the damage until it's structurally too advanced.
That is perhaps her most alarming warning. She observes that the slow metabolic deterioration often precedes severe neurological symptoms by many, many years.
And she gives that powerful clinical anecdote.
She does. I've seen 55-year-olds with the early signs of Parkinson's, and they don't even know it yet.
That is just deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
Because it fundamentally challenges the idea of a disease diagnosis being the beginning of the problem.
Yeah.
It implies that by the time you receive a formal life-altering diagnosis for a neurodegenerative condition, the underlying metabolic failure, the inability to clear trash and properly fuel the brain, has been compounding for decades.
It shifts the entire focus from treatment to prevention. Her argument is that the subtle signs of metabolic dysfunction, the brain fog, the fatigue, the creeping high blood pressure, these are the warning signals. These are happening up to 10 years before the formal diagnosis.
So there's a window.
There's a powerful decade-long window where intervention can potentially interrupt or even reverse the metabolic cascade before the structural damage becomes irreversible. We have to address the hyperinsulinemia today, not in 10 years.
So the goal isn't just to feel better tomorrow, but to preemptively safeguard your cognitive future by making sure your body is consistently running its own self-cleaning program. Okay, we've established the serious problem, hyperinsulinemia and brain trash, and the physiological solution, ketosis and autophagy. But there's a huge psychological and metabolic hurdle in moving a deeply sugar-dependent metabolism over to burning fat.
A huge hurdle.
And that's where the radical, immediate practicality of the Sardine challenge comes in.
It really is the fast-track solution. It's designed to achieve that rapid metabolic flip. It's Dr. Bosworth's high-intensity tool to sort of shock the system into producing ketones quickly. It strips away all the complexity, all the variables, and all the common pitfalls that come with starting a traditional ketogenic diet slowly.
Okay, let's detail the specifics of this metabolic boot camp. What exactly does the protocol require of someone?
The protocol is very precisely defined. It's a 3-day nutritional experiment where the only food you consume is canned sardines.
That's it. Just sardine.
That's it. You're executing an extreme carbohydrate restriction while providing a very specific profile of nutrients that are designed to support the body during that difficult transition.
But why the extreme restriction? Why not just a standard low-carb diet?
The intention is speed and certainty. A slow transition can be so easily sabotaged by hidden carbohydrates in sauces or dressings, or just by the psychological difficulty of managing multiple food groups.
The decision fatigue.
Absolutely. By restricting the diet to one single food that is known to be zero carb and incredibly nutrient dense, you guarantee that the body runs out of its stored glucose, its glycogen, very rapidly. And then it's forced to activate the fat-burning pathways. It lets you bypass those agonizing weeks of keto flu that so many people experience during a slow induction.
Okay, but why sardines specifically? I mean, why not zero-carb ground beef or another protein source? It seems like a very arbitrary and, frankly, a somewhat unpalatable choice for a lot of people.
I get that. But sardines are unique for this metabolic reset because their nutritional profile is almost perfectly calibrated for the rapid induction of ketosis while also providing systemic support.
Okay, let's break down that nutritional profile. What makes them superior to, say, chicken or steak for this specific purpose?
Okay, so firstly, the foundational requirement. They contain 0 detectable carbohydrates. That is non-negotiable for rapid insulin suppression.
Got it.
Secondly, and this is critical, they are one of the richest sources available for essential omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA.
And the importance of that, as we discussed, is that it actively fights inflammation.
Yes, so it's a dual attack. As you shut down the pro-inflammatory signal of high insulin with the 0 carbs, you are simultaneously flooding the body with the most potent anti-inflammatory agents available in the omega-3s.
So it's not just about stopping the damage, it's about actively starting the repair.
Immediately. This is so vital because the transition into ketosis can temporarily raise certain stress markers, and that high omega-3 content helps mitigate systemic stress and cools down brain inflammation right away, which actively combats the symptoms of brain fog.
That makes a ton of sense. They're providing the clean fuel and the necessary tools for inflammation repair all at once.
And there's more. They also provide high-quality, complete protein and essential micronutrients like vitamin D and calcium, but without the massive environmental toxin load you might find in larger fish like tuna.
That's a good point.
This is crucial because you need to maintain cellular integrity during this 3-day fast. And practically speaking, the high fat and protein content also provides remarkable satiety. It really helps participants suppress the hunger pangs that would otherwise derail a rapid fast like this.
Okay, for the listener out there who is actually considering this intense reset, we need the granular details. How exactly is this implemented? Are there rules about the preparation or the type of sardine you should buy?
The protocol is quite specific in the source materials. Participants are instructed to eat up to 3 cans of sardines per day for 3 consecutive days.
Up to 3 cans.
Up to. You eat when you're hungry. And the sources recommend choosing high-quality sardines, preferably packed in olive oil or spring water. You need to avoid the ones packed in industrial vegetable or soybean oils, as those are often pro-inflammatory and they defeat the entire purpose.
Any tips for making them more edible?
Some suggestions are given for palatability, sure, things like adding a squeeze of lemon juice or a small amount of sea salt, but absolutely no carbohydrate-containing sauces or seasonings are allowed.
You mentioned hydration and electrolytes earlier. Given this rapid metabolic shift, how crucial are they, and what does the protocol advise?
They are completely non-negotiable. When your body switches from burning carbohydrates, where it stores water along with glycogen, to burning fat, it releases a significant amount of water.
The initial water weight people lose.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, water goes essential electrolytes, sodium, potassium, and magnesium. The sources are crystal clear on this. Participants must ensure high water intake, and they must supplement electrolytes.
How do they do that?
Typically through specific electrolyte drops or high-quality mineral salts dissolved in water. This is to prevent the symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and muscle cramps, which are the absolute hallmark of the keto flu.
Okay, so this intensity, 3 days of extremely limited food, is what's required to really force that metabolic switch. But I have to pose a critical question here. Is this 3-day extreme restriction safe for everyone? Does Dr. Bosworth address potential contraindications? I'm thinking particularly for listeners who are already managing complex chronic conditions like kidney disease or type 1 diabetes.
That is a highly important point, and the sources do address it with a lot of caution. The protocol is clearly presented as a nutritional experiment and is advised only for those who are metabolically able to handle such a rapid shift.
So not for everyone.
Not for everyone. It is strongly cautioned that anyone with pre-existing conditions, especially those on blood sugar or blood pressure medications, must consult their supervising physician before even thinking about this.
Why is that so critical?
Specifically, people on insulin or certain sulfonylurea drugs are at a very high risk of hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar, if they undertake this without medical supervision, because their body will rapidly dump its sugar stores while they are still taking medication designed to lower it.
So to be clear, the challenge is an induction tool for the metabolically flexible. It's not a standalone cure or something to be attempted casually by the medically compromised.
Precisely. It's an ignition key, not the whole engine. It's really meant to prove to the individual that they can achieve ketosis quickly. It provides that immediate positive feedback, that incredible feeling of mental clarity after 48 hours, which then empowers them to commit to the long-term lifestyle changes.
And those long-term changes bring us straight back to the 6 p.m. rule. The 3-day challenge is intense, but it's short. The 6 p.m. rule is a lifelong commitment, and you've emphasized it's just as vital as the food composition itself.
It is the anchor of sustainable metabolic correction. Dr. Bosworth emphasizes that as we age, our metabolic system loses its flexibility. Our bodies simply cannot handle late-night caloric intake the way a younger, more robust system might have been able to.
Can we just revisit the specific mechanism that makes that late meal so disruptive? What is happening physiologically at 8 or 9 p.m. that makes the body so much less effective at processing fuel?
So, as the evening progresses, your body's circadian rhythm signals a winding down of all digestive and storage processes. Your muscles become less sensitive to insulin. It's a form of temporary daily insulin resistance because they don't anticipate needing to store energy for activity while you're sleeping.
Right, you're not about to go run a marathon.
Exactly. So when you introduce a meal, particularly a high-carb one, at 8 p.m., the pancreas secretes insulin, but the cells kind of resist taking in the glucose. This leaves both your blood sugar and your insulin elevated for far, far longer than they would be during the day.
And as long as that insulin is elevated, the body is forced into storing fat, preventing autophagy, and suppressing those crucial overnight repair cycles.
That's the critical takeaway. The body is programmed to perform its maintenance and repair, its deep cleaning in the absence of energy input. When you introduce food after 6 p.m., you are overriding the repair signal with a powerful store and build signal.
That quote comes back to mind.
That quote, 1 bite of food after 6 p.m. is worth 10 bites before noon. While hyperbolic, it crystallizes the metabolic cost. The disruptive, long-lasting impact of that late-night consumption on your overall insulin resistance is immense, and it sets the stage for chronic disease.
So the true goal isn't necessarily calorie restriction, but temporal restriction, shifting the entire eating window earlier.
This is the very essence of metabolic synchronization. By compressing your eating window and shifting your calories into the early part of the day, you allow your insulin levels to drop to a low baseline long before you go to sleep.
And the benefits are?
The benefits are huge. It permits the unimpeded initiation of fat burning. It accelerates cellular repair through autophagy. It decreases the chronic fat storage driven by evening meals. And it consistently improves your insulin sensitivity, making your body more efficient the next morning. It's a virtuous cycle.
The Sardine challenge is the catalyst then. It's the sharp, necessary shock to the system. But once those 3 days are over, the true success hinges on integrating these principles into a sustainable, lifelong rhythm. We have to transition from a crash protocol to a continuum.
Absolutely. The sources make it very clear. Ketosis is not a short-term diet. It has to be viewed as a metabolic continuum, a flexible way of eating and living that can be sustained and customized based on the individual's needs, their activity level, their age. The goal is metabolic flexibility, not permanent, rigid restriction.
So for the listener who has successfully reset their system, what are the core habits Dr. Bosworth recommends to sustain that metabolic health and, keep the brain trash cleared out for good?
Her long-term integration guidelines are very clear and concise, and they're all built around controlling insulin signaling. First, the most difficult but essential behavioral change: Strictly stop eating after 6 p.m.
That's the big one.
It's the big one. This protects that nocturnal repair window and ensures insulin is minimized during sleep.
I imagine this requires massive social and scheduling adjustments for most people. I mean, family dinners, going out with friends.
It does. It requires a real commitment. But the clinical benefits, she argues, far outweigh the inconvenience. The second key guideline is related to nutrient density. Prioritize protein and healthy fats early in the day.
So front-load your day.
Exactly. This ensures high satiety, it provides stable, long-lasting energy, and it avoids that catastrophic blood sugar spike caused by traditional high-carb breakfasts.
Cereal, toast, juice.
Right, which immediately sabotage your insulin sensitivity for the rest of the day.
Okay, the third point, which is pretty standard for maintaining ketosis, is to keep overall carbohydrates minimal. This ensures the body just defaults to burning fat rather than glucose.
And finally, the fourth guideline connects directly back to those repair mechanisms we discussed. Cycle in and out of fasting states. This is where the flexibility comes in. You don't have to exist in a permanent state of caloric restriction.
That sounds more sustainable.
It is. But regularly extending the nightly fast, say, aiming for 16 to 18 hours between dinner and the next day's first meal, ensures that autophagy is periodically and powerfully activated.
This cycling is so critical. It ensures that the cellular cleanup crew gets its routine shift, preventing that slow, silent reaccumulation of the brain trash.
Precisely. You are giving the body consistent cues to maintain repair, ensuring that the metabolic gains you got from the initial Sardine challenge are preserved long-term.
If we zoom out, the ultimate long-term payoff here is just huge. It's not just about adding years to your life, but fundamentally changing the quality of those years. We're talking about preserving both lifespan and health span.
That distinction is paramount. Lifespan is simply how long you live. Health span is the period of your life where you maintain vitality, independence, and full cognitive function, free from chronic disease.
And the sources argue that the Medicine 2.0 approach, by just masking symptoms with drugs, primarily extends lifespan while sacrificing health span.
It leaves people managing decline for 20, sometimes 30 years.
But by routinely generating ketones and managing inflammation, you are maximizing the years you live well. What are the tangible long-term vitality metrics that her successful patients report?
The reports are incredibly consistent and profound. We see the removal of that chronic fatigue. People report stable, non-fluctuating energy throughout the entire day. No more 3 p.m. crash.
That alone is a game changer.
A huge one. Dramatic enhancements in sustained mood and cognitive clarity, the permanent elimination of brain fog, and critically, the reversal of major metabolic markers. High triglycerides plummet, HbA1c, which is a key measure of long-term blood sugar control, normalizes. And blood pressure often stabilizes without medication. This is a true reversal of metabolic aging.
It's about breaking free from the trajectory that society basically tells us is inevitable.
Yeah.
The slow, medicated slide into decline.
Absolutely. The emotional resonance of this transformation is highlighted throughout the sources. It frames the commitment to metabolic health not as a sacrifice, but as an investment in the future quality of your relationships and your activities.
And she frames that long-term payoff.
She frames it as reclaiming the ability to be the grandparent you dreamed of being, meaning mentally sharp, energetic, active, and present, able to get on the floor and play with your grandkids instead of being burdened by a host of preventable chronic conditions that just drain your time, energy, and resources.
This shifts the entire context of health. We started by recognizing that feeling of information overload and brain fog.
Yeah.
Dr. Bosworth's work suggests that the solution is not to manage the input, the information, but to optimize the physical and hormonal machinery that processes that input.
Yes.
You have to give the brain the clean energy and the clean operating environment it needs to handle the stresses of modern life.
Food is not just calories, it is hormonal information. And when that information constantly signals store and build, the entire system, including your brain, suffers the consequences. Check out Catra.
Okay, so let's bring together the most crucial takeaways from this deep dive into Dr. Bosworth's metabolic correction philosophy and the Sardine challenge.
First, the core problem. Insulin, when chronically elevated due to our modern consumption patterns, is the primary storage hormone. It is the root hormonal driver of systemic chronic disease, and its effects go far, far beyond simple blood sugar regulation.
Right. And second, the comprehensive solution, ketosis. It's the metabolic state where the body burns fat for fuel, generating ketones that act as a superior energy source for the brain and, fundamentally, activate cellular cleanup through autophagy. That's the key to clearing brain trash.
Third, the practical reset. The Sardine challenge is that highly specific zero-carb 3-day induction tool. It's designed to rapidly force metabolic flexibility and get your system running on clean ketones quickly, all while being supported by those anti-inflammatory omega-3s.
And finally, the essential long-term habit, the timing rule. Specifically, that strict commitment to stopping eating after 6 p.m. is a non-negotiable step that protects the body's nightly repair window and ensures chronic fat storage is minimized.
This philosophy, it completely reframes aging and vitality. It rejects the fatalistic assumption that brain fog or low energy or chronic disease markers are just a natural, unavoidable part of getting older.
They're not. They're signals of a metabolic mismatch.
Exactly.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you to consider tonight as you plan your evening. If optimizing your metabolism can potentially preemptively safeguard your brain against decline and clear out inflammation, what subtle signs of brain trash, that mid-afternoon energy crash, the difficulty recalling a name, or that constant need for a stimulant, what signs might you be dismissing as simply a busy day?
Knowing the tremendous metabolic cost of that late-night meal and the critical need for your body to run its repair cycle overnight, what immediate, simple shift could you implement tonight? Like adhering to that 6 p.m. rule, or just shifting your dinner time drastically earlier? What could you do to start enabling that crucial cleanup process and begin to reclaim your long-term vitality and your cognitive sharpness?
The machine is designed for self-repair, but you have to provide the correct operating hours and the correct signal.
Food is information and timing is the command center. Start the deep clean tonight.
Welcome to the debate. Today, our source material introduces a really compelling but, let's say, highly aggressive framework for metabolic health from Dr. Bosworth. It fundamentally challenges the traditional medical approach to chronic disease. Her thesis is that this explosion of chronic illness we see, diabetes, hypertension, even cognitive decline, it all shares a single root cause, chronically elevated insulin.
And her solution is, to put it mildly, not just management, it's swift, radical reversal.
Exactly. So the core question we're debating today is really about the methodology. Does the material correctly prioritize this immediate, aggressive metabolic intervention, the 3-day Sardine challenge, the rigid 6 p.m. food cutoff, as the essential path to lasting health?
Or does that focus on a sort of rapid shock action just oversimplify what's really needed, which is a customized, sustainable, long-term metabolic correction?
And I'll be arguing that yes, that aggressive, immediate reset is the necessary catalyst. You have to shock the system to force that crucial metabolic shift and get at the root cause of insulin excess.
And I'll be challenging the necessity of those extreme measures and, frankly, the claim that there's a single root issue. I think true enduring health requires prioritizing a sustainable, personalized rhythm over a transient, intense reset. My position is anchored in the profound level of metabolic damage that Dr. Bosworth describes. She's advocating for reversal, not management, and that is a key distinction from what she calls medicine 2.0. After years, sometimes decades of excessive carbohydrate consumption, the body is, it's metabolically trapped. Insulin is chronically high, it's signaling constant fat storage, and it's blocking the body's ability to even access its own fat for fuel. So we need a rapid, decisive force to break that cycle. And that's where these aggressive tools come in. The Sardine challenge, for example, is designed specifically to turn on the fat-burning switch in, 48 to 72 hours, forcing the liver to produce ketones. This swift action is non-negotiable because, and this is critical, the material shows that late-night eating keeps insulin elevated throughout the night, completely nullifying any supposed benefit of an overnight fast. So that strict timing rule is crucial. 1 bite of food after 6 p.m. is worth 10 bites before noon. It reflects the reality that an aging insulin-resistant metabolism demands aggressive discipline to restore flexibility. The severity of the protocol is really just a reflection of the severity of the disease we're trying to reverse. I absolutely recognize the need for metabolic correction. Targeting insulin resistance is, paramount to achieving reversal rather than just managing symptoms. My concern, however, lies with this intense short-term focus.
While the results cited are powerful, mental clarity, weight loss, disease markers improving, the goal articulated in the material itself is achieving a lifelong metabolic rhythm. So if the ultimate aim is sustained health, why lead with tactics that on their face appear fundamentally unsustainable? Identifying chronic high insulin as the sole root issue for such complex diseases is, I think, a highly reductive framing. We have to prioritize customization and, long-term behavioral compliance. I don't disagree with the metabolic outcome of the challenge, but I question the necessity of that specific restrictive protocol itself. The rapid shift to ketones and the start of cellular cleaning, or autophagy, is likely just driven by the extreme caloric and carbohydrate restriction. Wouldn't a less psychologically daunting, more varied but equally low-carb approach achieve the same metabolic results, with maybe higher compliance rates?
This shock tactic, I think it risks creating a kind of metabolic whiplash without providing the foundation for lasting change.
Core debate.
Okay, so let's drill down into that definition of the root cause. I find the claim that chronically high insulin is the single root issue for this whole spectrum of chronic conditions, hypertension, certain cancers, depression, neurodegenerative diseases. I think that's a vast oversimplification. I understand that insulin resistance is a pervasive metabolic dysfunction. It's a powerful driver, no question. But suggesting it's the one cause, doesn't that risk overlooking a multitude of other factors? Environmental factors, structural issues, other inflammatory pathways that also need to be fixed? Are we not confusing the strongest leverage point with the single cause?
That's a fair point, but I would frame it differently. Identifying the primary upstream driver is the most effective approach to systemic reversal. Dr. Bosworth isn't suggesting other factors are irrelevant, but that insulin is let's say, the common currency of metabolic damage. Her approach is based on treating the body as an interconnected system. The evidence demonstrates that excess insulin, driven by carbohydrate load, actively inhibits the use of fat, creating a systemic energy crisis. And that crisis is felt most acutely in the brain. When we talk about conditions like Alzheimer's, which is often called type 3 diabetes, the insulin dysfunction isn't just a side effect. It is the core mechanism driving plaque buildup and inflammation and cognitive failure. So if we can solve the insulin problem, we gain the greatest possible leverage to allow the body's own repair mechanisms to address those downstream issues. We are correcting the fundamental error in fuel signaling.
Right, and I agree. Correcting fuel signaling provides enormous benefits. But let's stick with neurodegeneration for a moment. If we use the analogy of a house on fire, okay, the high insulin is the fuel source, yes? But the fire may have already caused irreparable structural damage, creating toxic protein aggregates, cellular debris. While managing the fuel source, the insulin, is essential, does focusing exclusively on this one hormonal imbalance distract from actively addressing those other structural issues? It's a very clean hypothesis, but complex chronic disease rarely has a clean, single answer. We risk achieving metabolic reversal while, leaving key inflammatory or structural deficits unaddressed if we adhere strictly to this monocausal view.
But that moves us directly to the necessary intervention. You mentioned structural damage, and the key to cleaning up that structural debris is the rapid shift into ketosis, which initiates autophagy. If the body is chronically swimming in glucose and high insulin, the cell's trash collector mechanism is essentially turned off. The speed is warranted because we are trying to activate that vital cleanup process, autophagy, which involves breaking down misfolded proteins, damaged mitochondria, all that cellular debris. This is described as crucial for reversing brain fog and memory issues, and the material explicitly urges intervention 10 years before symptoms appear. If we accept the severe neurological stakes, waiting for a gradual shift via a less psychologically taxing approach could cost a patient precious years of cognitive function. In this context, speed is life.
That brings us directly to the Sardine challenge itself then. If the goal is rapid autophagy and ketone production, why the extreme specificity and rigidity of a 3-day single food challenge? I'm just not convinced that the material demonstrates this intense, specific regimen is metabolically superior to any other protocol that achieves the same severe caloric restriction and near zero carb intake. For instance, a diet of, say, high-quality fats and other zero-carb protein sources would achieve ketosis just as quickly. The shock tactic may offer a powerful psychological marker, a clear start, but I think it carries a high risk of burnout or relapse for people not prepared for that rigidity. I mean, isn't this just a restrictive fast branded with sardines?
I don't really buy that line of reasoning because the choice of sardines isn't arbitrary. It's a tailored, efficient metabolic tool. Yes, severe carb restriction drives ketosis, of course, but the challenge provides more than just ketone production. Sardines offer an exceptional profile of zero carbs, coupled with high-quality, complete protein to preserve muscle mass, and crucially, an immense concentration of omega-3 fatty acids. These fatty acids are essential building blocks for neurological repair and reducing systemic inflammation. The brain, which is the system we are desperately trying to protect here, it requires those specific nutrients during the cellular overhaul process that autophagy kicks off. So if the goal is maximal, rapid metabolic cleansing and neuroprotection, the specific nutrient profile of the sardines just maximizes efficiency during that required fast.
But efficiency at what cost? We're talking about designing a lifelong protocol. The sudden forced switch, especially one that relies on a single, often polarizing food, can be profoundly difficult to transition from into a sustained pattern. The metabolic data might show ketosis is achieved marginally faster, okay, but if 60% of people immediately rebound because the start was so extreme, the overall efficacy is zero. We have to address the real-world compliance factor. And while the omega-3 benefits are clear, does the material provide clinical trials comparing this 3-day sardine challenge specifically against, say, a calorically matched, zero-carb, high-fat fast using varied protein sources? Without that specific evidence, we are prioritizing maximal speed over established compliance strategies.
Look, we cannot prioritize comfort over reversing a potentially fatal metabolic syndrome. We are aiming for efficiency and effectiveness when the alternative is continued systemic deterioration. To use a sailing analogy, we're talking about turning a massive ship around. A gentle rudder adjustment takes months. A blast from the bow thrusters turns it immediately. The 72 hours of the challenge serves to fully deplete glycogen stores and force the body into a state of metabolic flexibility, meaning it can easily switch between glucose and fat for fuel. And that flexibility is the foundation of the long-term rhythm you champion. You cannot achieve that sustained flexibility if the body is still addicted and dependent on glucose signaling from the start.
Okay, well, if we accept that achieving metabolic flexibility is paramount, then we have to scrutinize the rigidity that follows the challenge, specifically the uncompromising 6 p.m. cutoff for all food.
While the principle of shifting calorie intake earlier is strongly supported by circadian biology, sure. Is the strict adherence to this specific hour truly metabolically necessary for everyone? I come at it from a different way. The primary metabolic benefit is derived from increasing the duration of the overnight fast. If an individual, due to work or family, fasts for 14 hours starting at 7:30 p.m. instead of 6 p.m., they are still achieving profound metabolic benefits. Does the material truly justify punishing those who achieve a significant but slightly later fasting window?
That's a compelling argument based on lifestyle adaptation. But have you considered the metabolic realities presented in the source material, especially as they relate to aging? The material issues an explicit, urgent warning about late eating because the body's ability to clear insulin diminishes significantly as we age and become more resistant.
Eating late forces insulin to stay high, precisely during the hours when the body should be conducting its most critical repair work, especially in the brain and burning stored fat. This window, often coinciding with deep sleep, is where cellular cleanup peaks. If insulin is spiking at 8 or 9 p.m., the body can't enter that fat-burning repair state effectively until well after midnight. The material stresses that late-night insulin secretion effectively nullifies the entire overnight fasting effort. That's why they say one bite after 6 p.m. is so metabolically detrimental. The 6 p.m. rule is not arbitrary. It is the pragmatic boundary drawn to ensure the body maximizes sleep-driven repair.
I agree the principle of early consumption is vital, but I believe the adherence to the specific hour suggests a rigidity that actively works against the lifelong rhythm we're seeking. The difference between a 6 p.m. and a 7:30 p.m. cutoff results in a 1.5-hour differential in the fasting window. For someone who can consistently adhere to 7:30, but fails entirely trying to hit 6 p.m. because of social or professional commitments, the overall outcome over 5 years is vastly better with the slightly later but consistent window. We need to distinguish between optimal efficiency and maximal compliance. The rigid boundary, if not met, can lead to that all-or-nothing mentality, which is the enemy of sustained metabolic health. The nuance here, though, is that it is not just about the duration. It is about the timing relative to deep sleep and circadian biology. When you eat late, you are fighting your own natural clock, forcing the liver and pancreas to work when they are programmed to rest. The entire point of the strict rule is that as insulin resistance worsens, the body struggles to complete its overnight tasks before the morning food arrives. By continually pushing that deadline, you are accumulating metabolic debt, even if you are technically fasting for 12 or 14 hours. For the population suffering from accelerated aging, which is the target audience here, the risk of that accumulated debt outweighs the flexibility concern. We need the system running on maximum efficiency to outpace the disease.
But in designing a pad for metabolic resilience, we have to account for real life. If the difference in metabolic outcome between 6 p.m. and a 7 p.m. cutoff is negligible for someone whose fasting duration remains 14 hours, the added psychological strain of the absolute rigidity undermines the very resilience the plan is meant to create. A system that offers slight personalization based on chronotype or schedule is far more likely to produce the sustained behavior change needed to ensure neurocognitive function over decades, not just months.
Conclusion. My position remains that when you're facing a pervasive, accelerating issue like chronic insulin excess leading to cognitive decline, the aggressive methods outlined, the Sardine challenge for a rapid systemic switch, and the strict 6 p.m. timing rule are simply the most reliable and efficient way to force the body to correct the root issue. The speed and severity are warranted because we are aiming for cellular cleanup and metabolic reversal decades ahead of symptom manifestation. The discipline demanded by the program is a direct reflection of the severity of the damage that needs to be overcome.
And my perspective is that while profound metabolic correction is undeniably critical, the extreme methods and the relentless focus on a singular hormonal imbalance risk trading short-term efficiency for long-term failure. True, lasting resilience and the achievement of that lifelong metabolic rhythm require sustained, customized changes. We have to prioritize maximal compliance and integration, treating ketosis as a metabolic continuum that is achieved through rigorous but not necessarily rigid personalized protocols.
So we both clearly recognize that optimizing metabolic health by enabling fat burning and ketone production is a critical lever for preserving both lifespan and health span.
The divergence really lies in whether the urgent need for efficiency justifies the application of maximal, highly restrictive intervention, or if a slower, more adaptable approach that's centered on compliance offers a surer path to lasting success. We encourage listeners to consider both the power of the aggressive reset and the demands of sustainability as they explore metabolic self-repair.